Pranam, sir. Dubey, sir, now you can start. Unmute and start.
Okay. Okay. So good morning, friends. It's a pleasure to be back again this Sunday. Our speaker this morning is Dr. Roshen Dalal. So I want to extend a very warm welcome to her, and also our thanks that she accepted our offer and is with us today. Uh, Dr. Dalal is going to talk to us on a theme: Is an Arhat perfect? Reflections on the life of J. Krishnamurti and other philosophers. Many of us know Dr. Roshen Dalal. She has spoken before this group earlier. But for those who are hearing her for the first time, I'll briefly introduce Dr. Roshen Dalal. Roshen Dalal is the author of 12 books, which include the best-selling two-volume Puffin History of India, the Puffin History of the World, also in 2 volumes, The Religions of India, a concise guide to 9 major faiths, then Hinduism, an alphabetical guide, the Vedas, an introduction to Hinduism, sacred texts, the 108 Upanishads, the compact timeline history of the world, then India at 70, snapshots since independence, J. Krishnamurti, a life of compassion beyond boundaries, and one novel, the Guru who came down from the mountain. Currently, Dr. Roshen Dalal is completing a book on Sri Aurobindo and is also engaged in historical research. Apart from books, uh, excuse me, I think she has taught at both his school and university and worked for many years as an editor. Born in Missouri, Dr. Dalal is now settled in Dehradun. With these words, I'll request Dr. Roshen Dalal to begin her discourse. And ma'am, you can talk to maybe up to an hour or so, and then we'll open the field for question and answer session. Thanks a lot once again, and a very warm welcome. Thank you. Please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here. Also, I'm happy to see all the participants. So I know everyone here is already familiar with Krishnamurti's teachings. So I thought of something slightly different, that is a reflection not just on his life, though mainly on his life, but also on the lives of other philosophers, spiritual people, and mystics. Obviously, we can't go into too many here, and the focus is on Krishnaji. Now, as I see it, there are two groups of spiritual people. One, we have those mystical masters, those people who seem to be normally unseen, but who are not dead, who are living somewhere in the world. Now, this is not just a theosophical concept, which we may think it is. This concept exists in all religions, at least in many religions. I'm not sure about all religions, but in most religions. Even in Islam, we have the concept of the hidden imams in the Shia sects, and also of abdals. They are hidden spiritual beings who are there in the world, but you can't see them or hear them. In Krishnamurti's life, of course, we are familiar with the masters Maurya and Kuthumi, whether they existed or not, but the concepts were there certainly. Then we have this other category of people who are rather normal, just like us, They are born, they live, they die, they get ill, and they suffer. And most of the gurus and saints that we know fall in this category, including Krishnamurti. We may also think of Sri Aurobindo, Ramakrishna, Sri Ramana, and so many more. They're born in the normal way, they live a normal life, they have contacts, relationships, friends, disciples, they eat food like anyone else. And finally, or sometimes not so finally, sometimes early in life, they get sick, suffer, and die. So here we are trying to see that in this category of people, what are their lives like? This is where we come to the concept of the Arhat, though it's which is a concept in Buddhism of those people who have perfected themselves while they are alive. So these perfected people, how do they live? Are their lives any different from the non-perfected? And also there are some more questions which I would like to raise and get people to think about. For instance, can anybody attain this state of perfection? Are there any prerequisites? When we look, for instance, at the Brahma Sutra and Shankara's commentary on it, it begins with the word then. It says, then the inquiry into Brahman. And he spends about 100 pages, well, or at least 50 pages, on explaining what is this word then. Why is there then? Then is because there are certain prerequisites before you can inquire into Brahman. To go back one step, when Krishnamurti talked about truth as the ultimate goal, truth which we, as we all know, he said was a pathless land, and he said a lot more on truth. It is somewhat equivalent, not entirely, but somewhat equivalent to terms from other contexts. That is the attainment of Brahman, the Atman's identity with Brahman, Mukti, Moksha, Jivan Mukti, Kaivalya, all these terms. But as I said, when Shankara tries to understand what the Brahma Sutra means by saying, then the inquiry into Brahman, that ultimate, he says there are prerequisites. He explains at great length what are these prerequisites. So this is a question which I would really like this to turn into a discussion rather than a talk. So this is a question that are there prerequisites? If so, what are they? Then is this attainment possible at any age? In some cases, we do find these young children also who are already what they say is God intoxicated. We have the case of both Ramakrishna and Ramana from the age of 16. But in the case of Krishnamurti, though he had some early mystical experiences, he attained to his full philosophy and so on later in life. So is there any age? If a very small child can attain this perfection, then how is it possible? Is there something called a past life? Were there attainments in the past? What exactly was it? So, and another question is, are there other aspects involved? Are these people in touch with some hidden mysteries which the normal person doesn't know? Do they have unusual powers? And do they have contact with superior beings? And finally, are their lives predetermined? Is everything planned from the beginning? So these are some of the questions we would like to raise. primarily in the context of Krishnamurti's life, but also touching upon others' lives, because there must be some universal principles behind this. He's not the only one to have attained the truth or enlightenment. There have been many before. I don't know about many after, but surely many before. So what are the basics behind this that we as ordinary people can understand? To start with, I would read out just one or two sentences of what K meant by truth. One of his early statements was, "Now to me, there is reality. There is an eternal living reality. Call it God, immortality, eternity, or what you will." And of course, he also said that nobody can lead another person to this truth, because truth is infinite. It is a pathless land. No one can tell you how to find it. He also said that no one can go through stages. There are no stages according to him. Whereas Shankara speaks of prerequisites, K says there are no stages. Because this does not lead anywhere. When one looks at growth or personal evolution as a series of achievements, moving from a lower to a higher state and advancing, then there is no spontaneous flow. He also said that there is no student in this search for truth. There is no master or student. At the same time, he said truth is not cumulative. Then he also adds that love is the same as truth because both are timeless. So here we have just a few of his statements. There are hundreds or even thousands more on what he means by truth. And to some extent, these are all, corroborated and repeated in different philosophies. He comes closest to Buddhism, which also sees the necessity of awareness from moment to moment. So going back to the questions we asked, was K's life in some way predetermined? Was it different from that of others? So let's look a little bit at some aspects of his life. Obviously, I can't go into all the aspects, but some of the aspects. So as we know, he's born in Madanapalli. That's not, everybody knows that. Probably in 1895, though that wasn't always firmly known. His father was a actually highly educated person for that time. Jindu Narayanaya, he studied in Madras Christian College. He also had a certificate for education in teaching. And though the Theosophists have put forward all kinds of wrong statements on them being very poor and so on, they were actually rather well off. He was a government servant. They had no financial problems. And he joined the Theosophical Society. This is the father, right back in 1882 when the first branch opened in Madras, which indicates that he was a person who could think for himself, was not just bound by his caste. Now, as we know, the Theosophists adopted Krishnamurti and his younger brother Nitya in sometime in 1909. But Krishna had there were other children before Krishna was born. But Narayanaya himself provides information on his financial status. At a slightly later date, he provided this information, but I am going to read out exactly what he said here, which indicates that Krishnamurti came from a good, fairly well-off family. He said, I have some property and I am able to maintain my boys. He had property in Balatur, and he said, apart from that, I have independent property. I get about rupees 30 a month for my share. My property in Madanapalli, which was worth about 10,000 rupees, is mortgaged for rupees 1,000. I get there 60 rupees a month. I have insured my life for 10,000 rupees and I am paying 30 for premium every quarter. On the average, I get about rupees 200 a month. Now, 200 a month in 1913 and 14 was a rather large amount. They were perfectly well-off people. The only problem was that his mother had died. Krishna's mother had died. And so the children were a little, not neglected, but perhaps they were missing the role of a woman. Nevertheless, the father took care of them, and he requested a post in the Theosophical Society after his retirement. When he finally got this post, he was never paid anything over there. He was not only took care of the esoterical society, but he also took care of the bakery and various other aspects, plantation. He was never paid anything. And according to his own account again, when he moved there, he had with him his 4 sons. One daughter of his had already died and one was married. So there were with him his 4 sons, a nephew, 2 other boys who had been left with him for education, his brother-in-law and his sister-in-law. So he had a big family. He was already taking care of all of them. When his eldest son, Shivaram, married, he took care of the education of his young wife so that she was fluent in Telugu, Tamil, and English, and also studied Ayurveda. So let us presume that Krishnamurti was not adopted by the Theosophists. He would not have had a bad life. He would perhaps still have been known through some guru, perhaps something like Ramana or something, one cannot say. So is it a matter of predetermination, predestiny that the Theosophists adopted him? Or would he in any case have been something spiritual and recognized as a spiritual person? I'm sure if there was always in him this, I don't want to say aptitude, but I'm not finding a better word right now, this inclination, as he himself used to talk about the vacant mind, if there was already this spiritual inclination in him, it would somehow or the other have come out. In any case, now they moved to the Theosophical Society in January 1909. Soon after that, Charles Leadbeater came over there, saw Krishnamurti and Nitya on the beach, and felt that he was a perfect being, that his aura indicated something very high. However, he could not, straight away say that he wanted to have a closer association or teach them, as those who are familiar with his life would know that he was somewhat under a cloud of having too close associations with young boys. In any case, when Krishna and Nitya went to this school in Madras, they were treated very badly, particularly Krishna. And his father himself removed him from school, saying, I will teach him myself, because I have a degree in education and we cannot tolerate this teacher beating them up, particularly Krishna. So he took him out of school. Leadbeater, seeing this as a great opportunity, now said that he would offer to teach them in the Theosophical Society. Thus it started that the two boys went to the TS to learn and study, and also gradually they were trained in many things. That physical fitness was very important. So not only did they learn English, maths, and so on, but the emphasis was there on physical fitness, also on cleanliness, neatness, and wearing good clothes. Now, of course, Leadbeater was this occultist. He believed in hidden worlds, masters, the occult. And so he narrated 70 lives, uh, 42 lives of Krishnamurti going back into the distant past. The first was in 70,000 BCE. Now, whether we believe this or not, these were his ideas, and he obviously conveyed these ideas not just to Krishnamurti, but to everyone around. All the characters were there that were present in his current life. All the characters were there in 70,000 BC and in succeeding lives, but their relationships kept changing. So according to Leadbeater, in his very first life, he gave them all the names of stars for continuity, because names change in every life, according to him. So according to him, in the very first life, he gave Krishna the name Alkyone. Alkyone was a person in the Gobi desert, and his father was Mars, that is Leadbeater's name, who was now the master Moria. And his mother was Mercury, who was now the master Ptolemy. And there were many others. So there is a verse, in one of his in a biography of Annie Besant, where everyone was very keen at that time to say that they were that they had been part of Krishna's lives in the past. There was a competition to say, well, I was so and so in this life, and I was so and so in this life. So there was this little verse he had put over there. In the lives, there are many, I think, masters and wives or brothers and wives. I don't quite remember it, but just came to mind. Like there was this fierce competition. I was his mother in that life. I was his daughter in that life. So this kind of atmosphere was being created around Krishnamurti of you are a great person. Then, of course, his first initiation, the occult world, Leadbeater and others believed that you were initiated by a great guru or master, and that gave you certain special qualities. And there were levels of initiation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the very first initiation, Krishnamurti was taken in his astral body while he slept. Now, I'm not saying I believe all this. I'm merely narrating what was written about him by Leadbeater and what Krishna himself believed at that time. He was taken in his astral body. He met all the masters, the Buddha and Sanat Kumar, the Lord of the world. And that first initiation took place. Then the second initiation took place in Taormina in Sicily. It was at this time that his father tried to get his boys back and filed a court case for this. And it was during the court case that he revealed that he gave all the details of his finances, saying that he was perfectly capable of caring for his boys. Nevertheless, He won the case twice in India, but when the case went to the Privy Council, which Annie Besant took it there he lost. By this time, Krishna was already 18, and neither he nor Nitya wished to return to their father. Thus, they were then taken care of by the Theosophists until the point of time when he uh, dissolved the order that had been created for him. The Order of the Star, first called the Order of the Rising Sun, it was started 1 year after his first initiation. George Arundale was among the major promoters of this. They wore silver stars, and they had to acknowledge Krishnamurti as the Lord of the world. And also they wore magnetized ribbons. Here, for the first time, we come to this thing of magnetizing something, which Krishna continued to do all his life. So here they used to take some ribbons, chop them into pieces. Krishnamurti would hold them in his hands. They were then imbued with a certain power, and then the person who wore it would be protected by that power. That was a theory. Also at this time, there were certain things that Krishnamurti continued all his life. This emphasis on physical exercise, keeping oneself fit, cleanliness, and even the food habits, which Leadbeater had introduced milk and eggs. So Krishnamurti did continue to eat eggs throughout his life, which probably he wouldn't have done otherwise. Plus, he maintained his body, he kept himself fit, and he was always perfectly dressed. And also he continued in later life to magnetize various things, whether it was rings that people wore, or it was jewels that were placed in all the places where he lived in the northeast corner. Magnetized jewels were buried in all these areas. Now, as I say, we're only going into a few aspects of his life. So Krishnamurti, despite all this, he remained somewhat simple and unaffected by this. It did not seem to have gone to his head. He had no great ego. He did not think of himself as, oh, I'm great. And I don't think he ever thought of himself in that way. Somehow or the other, he remained unaffected by this. Now, we go on to look briefly at how was he growing up. He was with the Theosophists. They were traveling all over the world. He was told that he was a great philosopher, but he himself did not feel it. He felt that he had to know what they told him to do. He was a kind of innocent person, quite simple. But he was growing older, and it was inevitable that he should have a few romances on the way, because he was not yet convinced that I'm the world teacher or I'm anything. So it's very interesting how his first love started. His first love was of a young girl called Helen North. He saw her when he was in Amsterdam running a race, and he was extremely attracted to her. He fell in love with her, and she wrote about this love many years later. She says, the earlier love was passionate and compelling and professed to be eternal. It lasted full of protestations of undying devotion for half a dozen years, then sank into cool acquaintance, finally to non-recognition. What we had was lovely while it lasted, with an exquisite beginning, but with a needlessly callous ending. When he first met me, he was guileless, innocent, and pure, exquisitely ardent, overwhelmed with these new emotions stirring in him. We should note the year, because the year is 1921, September. He's already 26 years old. He's been with the Theosophists for 12 years, yet he retains the innocence. He doesn't have that maturity of somebody that age. He retains a kind of innocence and, as she says, guileless. He hardly is aware of what is happening. In fact, she compares his love to the fairy queen Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream, when a spell is cast on her that she'll fall in love with the first person she sees. She compares it to that. She said he was just ready to fall in love. So here we have a person who has been trained, who has been told, you have these, you're the Messiah of the world, you're the world teacher, and yet he is an innocent, pure soul who suddenly has these unknown emotions. Thereafter, he also has feelings for Mary Lutyens. He has a slight flirtation with Mar Manziali and with Ruth Roberts. I can't go into the details of all this, but it's very interesting what he wrote. At the same time, he must have had some concept that he is superior in some way to Helen. Helen was only 17, he was 26 years old. Because when he had to leave her, which he was very sorrowful about, he left a list of instructions. And it's very interesting to see, because here is 26-year-old Krishnamurti. It reflects his own ideals at this time. So he wrote these down and he left it for her. He said, you must be great. This is the instructions to Helen. Not because it may bring you power and pleasure, because intrinsically it is right. You must be great and magnificent in all things, both small and big, because my love for you is immense, pure, and noble. You must keep your body as clean and as pure as your conscience. The evolution of your body is as important as the development of your higher self. Beauty of the body is of utmost importance, for it showeth that thy greater self is also striving after greater beauty. Look after your body thoroughly well. Clean food, sufficient but not too much. Clean hands, feet, teeth, hair, plenty of sleep. Take exercise every morning for 20 minutes. Never be influenced by anybody, not even by your dearest friend. All your friends must be pure in mind and body. You are great. You must be great. And so you must be great at playing the violin. Helen was a musician, a budding musician. Practice regularly every day. Be well dressed always. Now, I'm sure an ordinary young girl would be a little baffled by this list, but we would see that this be well dressed always was something that Krishnamurti kept in mind throughout his life. He was always perfectly dressed. So this is something that started right then. Then he had to leave for India. He said, darling Helen, I love you with all my heart and soul and shall always do so. Bless you, Krishna. Now we know that he also had love for Lady Emily, whom he had met some time ago, who was a theosophist, and the wife of Lutyens, who actually was the architect for New Delhi. But that was a more love of a son for a mother, whereas here he had his first romantic episode which he was quite open about. And nevertheless, there's something a little didactic in him telling her what she should do and what she shouldn't do. Now, it is after much later in life, he told Doris Pratt in England something about these early years. He said, "By Jove, I had a myth once." He used to use all these terms like by Jove and so on, because I guess they were the old English terms that Leadbeater had used. I had the myth that I was to be the world teacher when I really was an ordinary young man. At that time, and I wanted to do everything that a young man wants to do: fall in love, get on a motorbike, race around. I was just a young man. I had a struggle between the myth and the fact. Now, this is the end of 1921. He's thinking like this, and yet from 1922, everything changes. So here we go back to that question that how is there a certain age? In this case, he had reached quite a good age before he came upon and was convinced of his spirituality, of his role in the world, and of his philosophy. Now, in June 1922, they moved to Ojai. In July, they reached Ojai in July 1922. This was because of his brother Nitya's illness. And there they met Rosalind Williams, who at that time was 19 years old and was very pretty, golden haired, blue eyed, also very caring, motherly, vegetarian, very clean, very capable. So they all were very fond of Rosalind. Both he and Nitya were very fond of Rosalind. Now, here we have his first experience and the beginning of that which is called the process. In fact, August is a very crucial month in these early years for Krishnamurti because he started meditating. He had received a message. All this time, you have to remember, he was receiving messages from the masters. He received a message from the master Kuthumi, and he began to meditate every day. He began seriously on August 17th when certain things began to change within him. And within 3 or 4 days, he had that first experience where he saw the light and was convinced that he had totally changed. So he saw it was on the probably on the Sunday. August 17th was said to be a Thursday. And soon, after meditating just 3 or 4 days, he had a divine experience where he sat under the pepper tree and outside in Ojai, and there he saw this glorious light. Both Nitya and others wrote an account of what they saw, but in his own words, he said, "Now, I have stood on the mountain top and gazed at the mighty beings. I have seen the glorious and healing light. The fountain of truth has been revealed to me, and the darkness has been dispersed. Love in all its glory has intoxicated my heart. My heart can never be closed." He felt also the vibrations of the Buddha and saw the Lord Maitreya and the Master Kuthumi. So from this point onwards, there's no looking back. He continues to have various experiences. He has what people call the process, where he has this agonizing pain and he's not able to uh, really understand what is going on. At the same time, he has these friendships, not just with Helen is now receding into the background, but he still has Helen as a friend. He has Mary Lutyens, and he has Rosalind. So here, while we would look briefly at what exactly was happening to him, he said, um, okay, I'll come back to that later. At this time, we have the thing that he is beginning to fall in love with Rosalind. This has not gone very far because he seems to be, friendly with everyone. But nevertheless, Rosalind is his special friend. Nitya is also very fond of Rosalind. So when we look at this process, I would now like to bring in someone else. We see similar accounts from many spiritual people. I think you are all aware of what the process he went through. He had a lot of pain in his back and in his neck. He was not able to understand what it was about. Uh, and then after this, in between, he would lose consciousness. Then he had spiritual experiences, or he talked in other voices. Sometimes he spoke like a child. So here we have an almost identical description from Gopi Krishna. Gopi Krishna came to be known as a spiritual person. Gopi Krishna speaks of an event that began in 1937. He used to sit in meditation every day. One day, with a roar like a waterfall, liquid light entered his brain through his spinal cord. This is Gopi Krishna we are talking about. He was pure consciousness without a body. He had a state of immense happiness and exaltation. When he returned to normal, he was tired, lacking in appetite, and not feeling good. This took place many times. For several years afterwards, he swung between light and darkness, insanity and sanity, life and death. At times he felt glorious, at other times he could not eat. His wife supported him through these difficult years. He continued his job. He was a government officer, but he faced immense difficulties. He saw luminous light, but wavered between elation, dread, and fear, and an inability to concentrate. He couldn't control the rising current. Many changes took place. Later on, he said, I was burning in every part of my body while my mind swayed erratically. Later on, he said that this needs to be explored. He said an automatic mechanism was forced by the practice of meditation. At times, his body burned, his hands and feet were cold as ice. He was in a scalding sea of pain. He believed afterwards that he had, now I can't go into all the details, but he had aroused the Kundalini in the wrong way. And when he finally got it right, everything was fine. So we see that many people on a spiritual path had some experiences of this kind. Gopi Krishna believed that it should be scientifically explored and one should see whether it could be replicated. Now, leaving this aside, we'll just go on to a few more aspects of his life. As you all are familiar with him dissolving the order and making that famous statement, truth is a pathless land, on 3 August 1929, and then going on to develop his own philosophy. So there are various stages in this. Particularly important are the warriors when he was really not able to speak, and he developed a close and relationship with Rosalind, which turned into a sexual relationship, which evidently Rosalind's husband Rajagopal was not aware of initially, though he was certainly aware that they were very close. Now, here, I mean, all these, what is very interesting here is not so much also this relationship, but also the fact that there too, during the war years, he lived with this same simplicity and innocence that he had before. This is Rosalind's and Rajagopal's daughter Radha says how she and her cousin David used to play jokes on him. They would sit on a tree and dump a bucket of water on his head. They would put frogs into his bed or give him orange juice that was not orange juice. And he would participate, like a child, just laughing and going along with it, even though he knew all the time what they were about to do. So she presents this very lovely picture of still an innocent young man. He also was ready to do any work. He couldn't milk the cows. Rosalind kept cows. They were warriors. There was rationing. They did not have much food. Rosalind used to somehow or the other make their own clothes. They kept cows and hens. He couldn't milk the cow because his fingers were always icy cold. But he could feed the hens, clean the chicken coop. He had no problem with all this work. So he retained, he never became that I am great. He never had that sense within him. Now, what is interesting here is that when the war ended and he finally left, there was actually no problem in his relationship with Rosalind and Rajagopal. This is indicated by the fact that he left a will, leaving everything to Rajagopal and making Rajagopal his executor for any other aspects of his life. It's after he came to India that certain things began to change. But now, leaving aside his India days, as we have taken up already a lot of time, I will just look at how did he live? What was the life of this man? Because that was our first question. How does a perfected person live? So we jump a few years and get into the years with Mary Zimbalist. He started living with Mary Zimbalist in the late 60s. And why this is very interesting is because she provides absolutely the best account of his life. She notes down every detail of everything he did. So here we know how he lived in those years. He was already 70, but still, what was his life like? Very well dressed, Savile Row suits, shoes from the luxury Hello Lob, a luxury organization. Everything was always perfect. He only liked Mercedes cars. He loved to watch films in order to relax. But his his philosophy was still constantly emerging. At any point that anyone asked him a question or when he had to speak, it came out in a very automatic, not automatic, I don't mean, but it came out very spontaneously. So his philosophy was always there in the background, but he did not live a life of ascetic. He had, not that he was ever fond of any major luxuries, but definitely he only wanted two Mercedes cars, not a Jaguar, which Mary Zimbalist earlier had. He wanted his good clothes. He was always perfectly dressed. So we go back to those Helen days where he said, always be perfectly dressed. He was always courteous, no matter who was rude to him, like, for instance, U.G. Krishnamurti, I've read this, he replied politely. He, of course, by this time attracted a huge number of followers. He never used to drink coffee or tea, but occasionally he started having weak tea before his walks. But he was not devoid, of illnesses. He had several illnesses. Teeth were a particular problem. Then he had hernia. Then, as we know, in later years, he got cancer. He had a lot of suffering, pain, and finally his death. So here we come to this question again, that here are these ordinary people, not ordinary, extraordinary people. They may be arhats, they may be perfected, yet they live their normal life. They eat, they drink, they get sick, and finally death takes over. What happens after death, we don't know. He's not an exception. Very briefly, I would look at Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. He had an extraordinary life and yet an ordinary life. He used to eat fish, smoke tobacco. He had these extraordinary spiritual experiences. He believed and he saw God through every single religion. He just had to meditate and go into transports of ecstasy. And yet he got cancer and died at a young age. We have Vivekanand, who died before the age of 40. We have Ramana, who also got cancer, though he did not die so young, by the age of 70. So I don't know, I am really asking certain questions, that is there a pattern in their lives and of the hundreds and thousands of other realized people whom we read about, not just in India, but I'm most familiar with those in India, but they are in every country. Is there anything we can learn from this? Is there a way forward, or are their lives different and predestined from the beginning? Krishnamurti, as we know, he said nobody has changed. He was a little disappointed. Though certain people believed they had changed themselves, like Vimla Thakkar, and I'm sure many have changed, certainly, if not into full realization. But the aim of today's talk is to see, is there something to learn from his life and from others' lives? Was his life just different? Was it predestined? Was he destined to have these experiences? Was Ramakrishna destined to have it? Or is there something else involved? So I think I'll stop there. I could also go into Aurobindo very briefly. Now, Aurobindo started out had a very interesting life, because he too was moved away from his family. And though he had a mother, but the mother had psychological problems. At the age of 5, he was sent to school. At the age of 7, he was sent to England. He grew up English in his, not in his attitudes, but in his background, English speaking, expert in Latin and Greek. He came back, and after some time, he joined the revolutionary movement. But then, leaving everything, he went to Pondicherry. He had his spiritual experiences while in jail. And in Pondicherry, after 1926, he lived in seclusion till the end of his life for 24 years. Sri Aurobindo never stepped out of his room thereafter, except on maybe one or two very, very rare occasions when he had to. He was a great intellectual, unlike Krishnamurti, who got things spontaneously. Aurobindo read from morning till night. He wrote millions of pages of erudite stuff. He had these tremendous spiritual experiences. He had a plan for the future of the world, yet his life was very different. Didn't bother about clothes. He wore his one, dhoti with the end thrown over his shoulder, and all day he read and wrote. I mean, this is a very brief account of Aurobindo. I've written a book on him. It would perhaps come out by next year. So here, let's go back to those questions. Is there something that can any person be like them? Can any ordinary person be like them? Or were they different to start with? That's the main question here. Let's have some discussion on it.
Thank you, Roshanji. Thanks a lot for bringing out the details of the lives of Krishnaji and briefly about others. It only shows that they were also human beings like all of us.
Yes, yes.
But the questions that you have raised certainly need clarity and more explanation. Harshad Bhai has raised his hand. We'll start from there, and I'll also request Dr. Gajanan Rao to say something on this. Yes, Harshad Bhai, first. Unmute yourself.
Yes. Are you able to hear?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dubey. Thank you, Roshan. It is very, very interesting what you said, but you said in too much detail about Krishnamurti. And I feel that we can learn a lot, not from their daily life, but from what they have said, and whether we can really meditate on what they have said, and does it really help us? And I was very much attracted to Ramakrishna when I was young, and I was very much attracted by his life, by his experiences. But it seems that the teachings of Ramakrishna, though I enjoyed very much, it did not help me. And especially when I left India and I was in a different culture, all that I had fear and many, many problems I went through. But only when I came to Krishnamurti and when I read his book, and at that time I did not know what he was, whether he was alive or how he had lived. But what he said made me very curious about my own life, what was going on, and it really helped me very much. And so I have dedicated my life to Krishnamurti and his teachings and the schools. And so I do not, even when I read the life of Krishnamurti and his relationship with Rosalind, it did not affect me much because I felt that yes, maybe such a thing is possible. Krishnamurti was innocent in a way, and he could not see the consequences of the relationship he had with Rosalind. And I was also very much attracted to Pandit Gopi Krishna, about which you said, and I had correspondence with him. And when I was a teacher in Rishi Valley, I had gone to New Delhi and met Pandit Gopi Krishna and had a very good dialogue with him for 1 hour. And then after I came back to Rishi Valley, when Krishnaji came, I had a meeting with Krishnaji and I talked with Krishnaji about Pandit Gopi Krishna. And Krishnaji and Gopi Krishna both had met each other in Switzerland. And it seems to me that Krishnaji did not like that Gopi Krishna was eating meat, because Krishnaji felt that eating meat is not a sign of enlightenment. And Krishnaji felt that Gopi Krishna had gone through many, many experiences, but he was making too much out of those experiences. And in Krishnamurti's teachings, experiences are not very important, but how we live every day a moment by moment awareness of what is happening. And even in Ramakrishna, when he was old, he used to remember his past experiences, and he would tell his disciples about his experiences of Kundalini and Samadhi and all that. But Krishnamurti's teachings are very, very different in a sense that his teachings are about what is happening to us in our daily life every day, and whether we can see clearly what is happening, and a very good insight into our own mind, and come to that intelligence or awareness which can see what is happening within us moment by moment. So I feel that Krishnamurti's teachings are very, very great, and I do not give so much importance to the experiences which Krishnaji had gone through, but the clarity, what he has said, can affect some sensitive people, but at the same time, Krishnamurti's teachings can mislead many people also, and people become very, very proud and they begin to discard all the tradition and other mistakes. I feel in Krishnamurti there is a pure intellect or intelligence there, and in Ramakrishna there is a pure devotion. And a human being must have a balance between intellect and devotion, and without that, it can lead to many problems. Intellect can become very dry, human being, or devotion can make a person go into many illusions. So a combination of Krishnamurti and Ramakrishna is very good because that gives a balance. They are the extreme two sides in the spiritual spectrum. And I have many things to say, but I will not because there may be many other people who would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harshad Bhai.
Mm.
Dr. Gajanan Rao. Yes, sir.
I will be very brief. Thanks, Roshenji. I was reading about you in the Google this morning. Thought I must select some of the books from the bookshop that you have done many and read them. If one could achieve so much in one's lifetime, to go into Vedas, to go into many religions, our old ancient history, modern history. I think we are very grateful that you're here today to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your experiences with us. Well, it's also, you made it very plain, as Krishnamurti would himself say, I'm an ordinary man. Don't put me there. I'm with you. So he had what his experience there, which very human. He had also asked a very quizzical question to us. If I were not to be what I am, but a vagabond, a kind of a kind of a person who is in society looked on as somebody unwanted or ugly, but you hear the teachings, would you give it some credence? Would you respect him? At the same time, of course, he also said, he led one to think the teachings that came through him, not by him, from somewhere, not my teachings, never claimed my teachings.
Mm.
Equally interestingly, he had asked people, when somebody comes from somewhere and wants to know what kind of a man was he, I want to be interested to know what was he? Did he live his own teachings? Did he live the teachings himself? So it was, and when people ask you, won't you describe him? Leaving out all that goes on in ordinary life, which he had also experienced, there was something that put him above all of us. I would agree. And it did make us feel very extraordinary. I don't know, it may be kind of a feeling. He was with you, standing close by or saying something. Something generated in you as an emotion, which maybe so many others have felt. And in conversation, he was lovely, loving, kind, and very affectionate. I don't want to say, I have not much to say, but I want to say this. He has left something of a legacy to be lived in daily life, which is being ordinary, but as he explained to one of his close friends, lady friends, that be pure. Don't encourage any nonsense in your mind. He also said in book, sex has a role when you have love in you. Out of love in you. That love is pure. So it's not, you see Krishnamurti as a mixed man now at all. No. He had that greatness in him, that dimension in him, which you don't feel ordinarily elsewhere. I'm not comparing him really. And the way he grew, so you're feeling because of, in spite of, he is what he was. You know, the early childhood, the school, later in theosophy, and just giving it up because there was a lot of nonsense in it. And coming out completely, being alone, showing to the world you can live alone. You don't require support to be what he was. And no doubt, most people felt you knew him, that he was a teacher. He was a great teacher. He was a world teacher. To sit in the United Nations first time and say, in a talk, nations cannot be united. Needs to know, and he had that because of his own feeling of being absolutely objective in our say. Objectivity is one thing which you could never think he was not. So there's not much to say, that you felt so great when you were with him. Moments. It may be a bit of an emotion, I don't know. After he left, it continued to haunt you in a way, that what he said, how he lived, it is wonderful to watch every moment. The way he ate, the way he walked, the way he smiled, the way he held your hand like a child. So people are fortunate to be, I wouldn't say fortunate to be, anyway, I was alive when he was alive. So it was a bit of his life, one could see directly. And as Parekh said, not to mix these things up. I'm glad to know he was as ordinary as any other person. But then there is always this whole which will not mix with anything mean. That whole stands separately as a giant in anybody who may indulge in a few little things. But as an ordinary human being, as somebody ate meat, somebody ate eggs, somebody had something else. But maybe it's a great blessing. I don't know how to really summarize this. There was a great blessing on him, which lived through that. Thank you. Thanks, Roshen.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir. Thank you.
undoubtedly, he was great and he was extraordinary, and his philosophy is something that brings us all together. But then the question is that how do we attain that? Or is it possible? That is the question. There's no question that he was not great. He was, of course, great, extraordinary. His teachings are extraordinary.
Yeah. So
But how do we reach that?
Yeah.
That is the question. Is it predetermined? Was his life predetermined to be like that? Was it something in his life? What is it that sets him apart and sets these other people apart? How do ordinary people, can any ordinary person like myself get that state or not? That is the main question here. There's no doubt
Again,
that he was what he was, there's no doubt.
yeah, there was this remark by himself at a samadhi where he was taken to a very great man, I think Raghavendra, I don't know. And people explained to him, he was this, he was that, he was great, and so many things. And Krishnaji asked one question at the end of all that description. So what are we? I agree, he was all that. What are we? So this question can go to us, Roshenji, I feel, not with a kind of remorse, regret, or kind of a, you know, what am I can always go. That comparison doesn't bring you an inferiority quality, but I would easily die as I am without any disappointment if I was not like him or anybody else. Because we are all human beings with our shackles. To be out of the prison is not easy. And Harshad was saying any time of life one can see and go through the whole thing. I don't live with that expectation and be disappointed later. I feel the best we could do is go into ourselves to find out any time, which not many of us are able to do. Go into the kind of the self-knowing procedure. Very often we could do that. We could at least live as good men and women. I don't want to project myself to be anything else. But I think we should, basic things we should do is that know ourselves at any time and be in the present. Not compare, not go to the future, what I should be and all that. But this is important, which many of us, that could be meditation itself. I may be wrong, I'm sorry, I'm blabbering off, but I have a feeling most of us have to have the guts to face oneself, has to inquire into oneself very sincerely, honestly. So this honesty basic is required. But I do agree with you and look at this way. Is there something that quality of determination in them, put in them even through previous janmas, even one leads to think there must have been janmas. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I do get a feeling through your talk, as you said, 40 janmas or 7,000 BC. You know, something does die off. Something remains to continue is my feeling. I may be wrong. That aspect is there, but also that this truth that we should be able to go into ourselves on a very regular basis, daily life, every minute's life, and know what I am and what I am not. Nothing else.
Thank you, sir. I think I agree entirely with Dr. Gajanan Rao that I think comparing ourselves with any great mystic or realized person will bring lots of problems. I think it's important that we watch ourselves in our daily life, in our relationship, and see wherever it takes us. One should be honest, truthful, and sincere in examining oneself. That is very, very important. And there is no goalpost to be reached. I think life is a journey, and just watch yourself where it takes you. That's all. We'll go to others. I think there are too many questions. I don't know whether we'll be able to cover all that. So I'll request everyone to be brief. We'll start with Mr. Pradeep Verma. Yes, Verma sir, please.
Yes, sir. I am audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Okay. What I see today is a mindful analysis of different minds that lived in specific times and spaces, their past. I question the relevance of these past events in our present moment, although others have also covered this. Even when what relevance, this only shows that past has relevance in the present, even when a lot of water has apparently flown in the river of consciousness. I am asking these questions because I don't know what is perfection in a changing world, or rather what can be perfection in a changing world, or whether anyone achieved it, I don't know. How can I answer Madam's questions, whether it was destined? I absolutely know nothing about it. It will be sheer imagination based on some of these experiences and stories like this. Then I have some question. Is it that Hinyan ultimately becomes Mahayan because one person's realization is transmitted to a number of human beings in geographical times? Like all these things have been talked about and dealt by JK himself, because individual is itself collective. We are comparing, categorizing, even reflecting on reflections, finding out differences in apparently different manifestations. So this whole exercise, all mental, to me, what I learned today is that conditioning can expand to unknown lengths. Thank you for giving me this time. I think this is what came to my mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. We'll go to Mr. Prasad Mulupuri. Yes, sir. Prasad, sir.
Sir, Madam has done a great job. I admire her because she has tried to be, she has been rational, not simply carried away by the name of a mystic. So to that extent, she has rendered great service to all of us. But then I admire Krishnaji because he is so realistic. If he had the romantic affairs and all that, they don't really bother me, because when I read that book, in the shadows of Krishnaji and all that, the impression I got was that he is a very generous person. He attended to small things like feeding the poultry, taking care of the garden, milking the cows, all these things, which are very, very simple, normal, and they put him on a different plane than other mystics. And then we, as Harshadji has said, we judge him by the truthfulness of his statements. When he says there is observer and observed, do we get it? I mean, do we see the truth of it? Sir, but one thing, he said he represents the intellect and the Ramakrishna represents the heart. But I don't think so. He represents both intellect and heart. He's an excellent combination of both. We, the scholars of Krishnamurti, we kind of pay attention only to the intellectual part of it. He wants us to observe the world, the mess in the world, the poverty in the world, and things like that. We don't do that. We are only carried away by some of his statements like you are the world, and we try to make meaning out of that. So he is both. He is not for kind of mysticism, vague mysticism and all that. So sir, you have put a limit on time. I stick to that. Thank you, sir.
Dubey sir, you are muted.
Okay. Thank you, Prasad sir. I have permission to extend it by 10 more minutes, and I have 4 speakers. So I'll again request everyone to please be very, very brief. I will start with Mr. Harnath. Yes, please unmute yourself.
So, first of all, I would like to thank Roshen ji. You had made the speech very introspective. And coming to the, in brief, she has 2 questions, like how an ordinary man has transformed into an extraordinary man. And are there any prerequisites to find out what exactly the truth is, or to find out what mystery is? So I don't want to call like the word prerequisitions, but I would like to call it as a necessities. If you want to become an extraordinary person, or if you want to find out the truth or the mystery, these are the necessary things. Like it follows, you should be innocent first, and the mind should be a sensitive mind, and the mind should with pure love, and there should not be self. So, and if you observe closely the lives of these persons of J.K. or Sri Aurobindo or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or the Ramana Maharshi, they had undergone enormous suffering in their lives. So what place has suffering in these things? We should have to understand that if you understand the suffering is the primary key to get enlightened, I can say. So if you understand the immeasurable, the mind must be, first of all, it should be still and quiet. So without understanding the reality or the outer world, you cannot able to understand the truth is. The moment you say his life is predestined, or it can be attained the perfection, the words predestined and perfection involves a measurement. The moment you say, is it a predestined, or is it a perfect, can we attain that perfection, or can we attain an extraordinary human, can we become an extraordinary human being? You're already caught in Maya, because it is a measurement. Maya is nothing but measurement. Word Maya is nothing but, the meaning of Maya is nothing but measurement. So you are already caught in Maya. So come out of that Maya and understand the things, what the order is, then only you can understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harnath. We'll go to Harshad. Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to say that each teacher, spiritual teacher or mystic, is unique. And it seems to me that what is common in all of them is that they have a different kind of energy awakened in their body, and which transforms their brain, and they begin to see the world in a different way than the normal way, through thinking, analyzing. So people who are scholars, they can understand the teachings, but there will be no transformation in them, because for transformation to happen, the quality of the brain must change, and one can feel it as Gopi Krishna has written, Ramakrishna was talking about, Krishnamurti talked about the mutation of the brain cells. So there is a possibility in each human being to come to that state if they are very, very passionate. And this is the most important thing in their life, then there is a possibility, and even then it may not happen because it is not in our hand. It is, we don't know the mystery why some people are coming to that state, that mutation. Okay, I have said enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that Dr. Parekh has said something very important here. We should, that the energy that transforms, we don't know how it happens.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We'll go to Harish ji, then Mr. Dinesh Waghmare and Hansa Choudhary. Yes. Harish ji.
Namaskar. Dr. Gajanan Rao asked a very pertinent question that struck me very deep. Of all the questions put forward by different people, and of course there were not many questions, there were observations, comments, remarks. Did Krishnamurti live his own teachings? Personally, I'm as his translator for about a decade, and briefly his interpreter also. Now, I personally perceive, this is my perception, that if there is one phrase that best sums up his teachings, that one phrase, only one phrase, self-critical awareness. Because if it is not there, then we can go on living the whole life in self-deception. And self-deception has myriad forms, manifestations, explicitly or implicitly. So, did Krishnamurti observe? First of all, very hard to say, because it is a very internal thing. But we all are aware of one episode in his life when somebody called him an idiot, stupid. He was wasting his time, and he was wasting the time of other people. And he did not outright say that he agreed or disagreed. And he said, "Sir, I will think over it. I must find out." So then, if it is very difficult, then is there any aspect of his life that he lived explicitly? I would say yes. Once he said, meditation is the quest of excellence. Krishnamurti never compromised for the second best. This is the second time probably that I'm describing briefly his some Indian going to meet him and spotting him at Harrods, London, and seeing him surrounded by dozens of ties, and he was toiling hard to select one tie. And later, after Krishnaji was done, he introduced himself and he said, "I am a little disillusioned with you." "Why, sir?" "You teach us never to choose. But today I saw you, how choosy you are." And he said, Sir, please believe me, I never choose. I always go for the best." Now, do we have that sense of best in our life? That is very pertinent. Okay. And I wish Roshen ji, who spoke so brilliantly, she would have included one aspect of Krishnaji's life, which interested me very much. Every time he was in London, he would make it a point to visit a restaurant and to watch a woman who used to, endorse some brand of clothes, and how gracefully she walked, and Mary Lytton has described it vividly. So that is one thing. And before I just stop, since I used to meet Vimla Thakar in Mount Abu, then Dalhousie, and then she was my guest in Uti when I was a teacher at the Blue Mountains School. Vimla ji never said that she changed, because there was a question, how many people of us changed ourselves? Vimla ji never said she changed herself. She gave full credit to Krishnamurti that while ostensibly treating her deafness in which she had 3 sessions at Rajghat, and on all the 3 days, Krishnamurti put one hand on her head and another hand on her ears, and it was deceptive in the sense, on the pretext of curing her deafness, Krishnamurti transmitted his energy, and her Kundalini was awakened. Of course, Krishnamurti, just when he was asked, he said, the lady is making too much of it. Okay. So I'm thankful to Roshen ji and Gajanan Rao for inciting some thoughts in me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have hardly about 5 minutes, so I'll request Dinesh ji and Hansa Choudhary to be very, very brief. Yes, Dinesh ji.
Yes, sir. Madam, are you able to listen to me?
Yes.
My observation on your questions is, first of all, we find that I also done some work on these questions. I found that there is one thing common in all these saints, that either there is a suffering, deep suffering, or there are deeper questions in their life. And because of that, they have moved towards the spirituality. So this one point is very common. Another point is this X factor, which you said. Whether we read Arvind in the Synthesis of Yoga, is made it very clear about this descending of supramental, or in case of Krishnamurti, we say the role of intelligence. So this X factor role, whether we call it through Guru or we call it through without any present Guru or from Master, but this role of these are very essential in my opinion, in my views, whatever I read. Another point, as you said, I also find one interesting thing, that all these saints, they are having worldly assignment. All the saints are having different worldly assignments, and their inner development is somehow whatever the incidences we find in their life, their their experiences are related to these outer assignments, and their inner state may be ultimately finally the same of similar, but their outer role and outer assignments are very different. So their all life situations and events are very much related to them. And most of the saints have said that don't go by their whatever they have faced, but whatever they have suggested or said, or what are they teaching, one is to follow them, and not through whatever they have gone through or whatever they have faced in their life. Another thing, as far as the sickness is concerned, Shankaracharya has made it very clear that one is to, or whether it is a saint or common man, one is to face their prarabdha, is whatever their hardened karma, and they have to go on through it. Although these saints and Arhat are having their different state of minds, or their state of mind is entirely different from the common person, but they have to face their prarabdha. And one thing is also I have found interesting, that all them have said, just one more sentence, sir, one more sentence, I am brief. They said that these experiences in these divine experiences or the mystical experiences are not important, but they are must for having the experiences of this X factor, we say, or of the intelligence, or of the supramental in terms of Arvind. And also Arvind has made it very clear, there is for the development, there is no fixed rule. In Synthesis of Yoga, he has made it very clear, there is no fixed rule for this development of any saint. Although there are, we can suggest the various ways and all that. And he has also made the mixture of all the ways, and he has come out with the Synthesis of Yoga. But he has clearly said that there is no fixed rule, and every time you will find that there is a newity in all the development of any new saints. What are you have to say on this? Thank you.
Yes, very valid points, particularly that the outer experiences of each are different, outer roles are different, but the inner, there is something in common. And also, it's very valid points.
Thank you. We'll take the last question now. Hansa Choudhary, please go ahead.
Namaste. Roshanji, you was very good aspects of Jai Krishnamurti, and thank you very much. And every person is a unique. I just want to say every person is a unique person, unique, and the JK's teaching is all about truth. How we can approach to the truth. How we can go to the truth. And I just want to ask you what do you think Krishnamurti's best teaching or best good thing in Krishnamurti?
Yes, I think that his key aspect is self-knowledge. He's not unique in this. Know yourself has been said from Greek days. But I think the key of his teaching is to look within and also to, I think someone else also mentioned this, it has to be your main focus. It is only when it becomes your main focus, you choose to look at this rather than all your other aspects of your life. Only then, through looking at yourself, through understanding yourself, you may reach the truth. I think that is I would not like to say a path, but I think that is the key aspect of his teaching, is not to just accept something on the surface, but to look within.
Thank you, Roshanji. Thanks a lot. We have come to the end of the program. I want to thank Roshanji profusely for bringing out something which was so thought-provoking. And
I would just add one thing, that actually I miscalculated the time, because I could have done one more hour for his later life, but I miscalculated the time. That is why there is less on his later life.
we'll
But,
invite you once again for that part.
no, some other time. Some other time.
Okay,
You
Yeah.
should. I was also wondering about it.
Yes, so some other time when you are free, we'll invite you once again.
Right, right.
Next Sunday, we have Mr. Michael Mendiza who will be talking to us. The time is 10 a.m. We have changed it to suit the California time. So you're all welcome to join us next Sunday at 10 a.m. And Michael's theme is, it's so damn simple. Krishji at one time said about his teaching, so he has picked it up from there. And Michael has circulated a great deal of homework. I've given it to Sushil Jain Saab, and he will circulate among all the participants. He wants all of us to read it to have the discussion more meaningful. So you're all welcome to join at 10 a.m. next Sunday. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dubey. Thank you,
Thank you,
Roshan Dalal.
everyone.
Thank you, Roshan Dalal. We are keeping your heart with us and we'll call back again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And hope feel refreshed. Thank you.